Welcome back, fellow Illumineers, to be our guest. Oh my gosh, we're doing it! We're doing it! Yes, I find myself amusing. We are doing our draft reviews for the newest set, Shimmering Skies. So here we are, and at the end of the last video, I was doing Amber, and I said, I'm pretty sure we're under 45 minutes. Now, I haven't edited that one yet, so I might get it under 45 minutes, but I was looking at the clock, I'm like, no, we were over 45. So, we're gonna do this one quicker, right? I think the conclusion that I've made is I'm not gonna zoom in on the cards that are either so basic or so bad that we don't need to look at this very closely. So, let's try that. Before we do that, let me go over at the start of the video, go figure, the rating system and what the heck we're qualifying these as. So we're going to do A, B, C, D, F as our rating system. A is first pickable and happy to first pick it. This is a bomb or just really effective card. There are commons that are absolutely within this territory. But ultimately, it's something that you're just like, you open your pack, you look at it, and you're like, yeah, this is the one for me. Love this one. Happy to have it, right? That's an A. B is, I'll first pick it, but I'm not going to be absolutely thrilled about it. But I'm definitely very happy to pick this up and have this in my deck. I will always play this card, and I'm going to kind of be picking it in the first half of the pack. C's are your, like, journeyman staples of your deck. You're almost always going to play these cards unless you've drafted so well that your deck's just crammed full of A's and B's. So you're always going to play these cards, or almost always. But you're not exactly thrilled to be taking them. You're just like, okay, these are cards that are going to fill out my deck, right? These are the cards that you want kind of in the middle to last half of the pack, and they're solid. D is, ideally, I'd like to not have this in my deck. I will play this, but I'd like to not have this in my deck if I can help it, and I'm certainly not wasting any early picks on it. These are cards that you are going to be picking up because it's the only cards left in the last third of the pack, right? Ideally, these should all be inkable. If they're that bad, you should not be taking an uninkable card that's that quality, right? And then F is don't play it. And usually that's because they're uninkable and they're like D quality and uninkable. But it could also, there could be some inkable cards that I rate as S just because they're so bad. And in that case, obviously, if they're inkable and you need ink, you're going to play them in your deck because you're only eliminating 8 cards that you drafted. So if you have, 8 uninkables that are Fs, you're going to play an F that's inkable, of course, right? But you should try never to have this anywhere near your deck, and you should only be using it as ink if I've got an inkable F in there. All right, let's go into Amethyst. Now, Amethyst is my favorite color. For anybody that is an OG that saw the original Battle of the Ink with Forbidden Mountain, shout out to you guys. You guys have been just absolutely crushing it. It is wild to me, the growth that you've experienced over the last year, and you deserve it. You've worked so hard at that, so shout out to you guys. But I've been an Amethyst lover from the start. I love me a good draw card, and Amethyst is the color of drawing cards. It's just also got a lot of the characters and the themes that I really like, and also I'm just a big fan of the color purple. Orange and purple are my 2 favorite colors. Amber's not quite orange, okay? It's amber. So, yeah. Alright, let's talk about Amethyst. Sadly, one of my favorite characters, Maleficent, this one is not it. I'm not even going to zoom in on this one because it's not worth your time. We talked about how 6 should be your cap on your ink curve. 7 is forgivable if it's strong enough. 8, it would need to be exceptional. It would need to be an utter bomb. And this is a 7/7/2 lore. Not nothing in terms of body, but not exciting, especially not for an 8 drop, uninkable. And then it helps if you have other Maleficents in play. Well, I can tell you, sadly, there's not a lot of playable Maleficents in this set. And certainly this counts as one of the unplayable Maleficents. And just having them bounce a few small characters or locations to hand is not worth investing in an 8 drop uninkable. So Maleficent is an F. Love that art, the green with the purple. Oh my gosh, so beautiful. The Nokk. We will zoom in on the Nokk. So, the Nokk is a 6-drop, inkable 5/5/1 lore. So already we're well below the average stat line for this cost. But when it comes into play, you can move 2 damage from your character to opposing. So I've already talked about how healing ain't that big a thing. It's not irrelevant. It's a useful ability, but it's got to be packaged with something else. That can't be the point of it, right? So removing the 2 damage, not as relevant. But applying it to an opposing character, now all of a sudden that's removal. So it's healing and removal in one package with a solid body, if not an exciting body. That's good. Now, this is at the top end of my ink that I'm trying to be at, so I can't be having a ton of these. I want 1, maybe 2 of these in my deck, because there might be some other 6 or 7 drops I want. Ideally, I'm like 3 to 5, 6+ drops in my deck, right? So I don't want a ton of them, so I got to be careful about taking this early. But I would still qualify this as a B, because this is a card that I definitely want to have in my deck. I just don't want a lot of them, so I got to be careful with this. So this is probably a low B, but it's still a B for me. Let's just filter. Why am I not filtering by the color that I'm doing? That would probably be useful. Wouldn't it? Wouldn't that be useful? Oh my gosh, Heath, you're so amazing. You're so smart. Cogsworth. So, 1 cost, 1/1/1 lore, inkable. When it comes to play, chosen character gains rush. Now, notably, this can be Cogsworth. You could give it self-rush. If they have a one something with 1 willpower remaining that you really want to rush into, you can give it to himself. But chances are this is best paired with something else. So if anyone remembers the pocket watch from the first chapter, this is basically this on a stick for 1 time, right? It's 1 cost to give something rush until the end of turn, which was really helpful, especially if you're like near the end of the game and all they need is to quest out again to win the game, but also all you need is 1 more turn to win the game. So it's the difference of whether they win next turn or you win the turn after. Giving something rush can be a huge impact. This isn't something you want to drop early. This is probably something that you want to drop turn 6, 7, 8, something like that, in addition to something that costs 1 less than that, right? Imagine this on turn 6 with the 5 cost 5, 6, right? And you're giving it rush, and you get a 1/1/1 lore, for your troubles. That's pretty good. It's not something that I'm like stacking my deck with, because I don't normally want to give a card to this ability. Like, the Pocket Watch was great because it was reusable. This is a one-of, but you also get a 1 lore producing body regardless of its abilities on there. So hopefully you get at least 1 lore out of this in addition. So still pretty good. Where does that mean? What does that translate to in terms of rating? Probably low B, high C, somewhere in there. Again, once I'm actually editing this, I'll kind of compile it into a list. But it's definitely one that I'm not ashamed to be picking, kind of middle of the pack type thing. All right, Merlin Turtle. So 4 cost, 3/3/2 lore. So we're 1 above the kind of vanilla stat line. But when you play him and when he leaves play, right? So the Merlin ability, as it were. You look at the top 2 cards, put 1 on the top of your deck and the other on the bottom. So it's the exact same ability as the squirrel, just on a bigger body. 3/3/2 lore is nothing to scoff at in terms of a body. I don't really want to be paying 4 for card selection and a reasonable body, but still pretty solid. Like, I'm not ashamed to have this in my deck. So for me, this means it's a C, right? It's a C because I think I'm going to have this in my deck every time, but I'm wanting to take it later on, right? I'm wanting this to be something where there's not really anything else of substance in the pack. So mid-C, somewhere around there. Archimedes. First of all, I love you. You sarcastic little so-and-so. Judgmental little owl. I love the character. I should love this card. It is a 3 cost, 2/2, 2 lore evasive. So this is the first evasive character we've come across. Evasive is massive in draft. First of all, in spite of there being a decent amount of evasives in this set, still the ratio of evasives you're likely to see in any given pod, any given group of 8, is pretty low. So your opponent's not likely going to be able to deal with this very easily. So you're almost, or you're at least frequently, going to be able to quest for 2 until the end of the game with this character. Here's the problem. There is so much really high quality 4 and 5 drops in this set. I mentioned this in the Amber video. That I almost always want my 1 to 3 drops to be affecting the board. I want to control the board so that when my great 4 to 5 drops come in, they can do their thing without being overly at risk themselves. And this can't challenge for garbage. So if you get behind, this card is awful. It's still great. But I want this to be like an A. But I almost think it's a low B. I'm so ready to be proven wrong. And you should hesitate to pass this because it's so powerful. And if you don't have the ability to deal with this, it's problematic. But there's a card that we're going to talk about in Steel that deals with this really effectively that you definitely want in your deck. And maybe even over this. So what am I playing over this most often? For me, and we're going to talk about this in Steel, but there's a 2/4 Simba that's 3-drop that I'm almost always wanting to play on turn 3 over this. And then by the time it's past turn 3, there's those amazing 4 and 5 drops I want to play. So I'm usually not playing this until like turn 6 or 7 or something like that. So it's not questing unabashedly for 8 or 10. It's questing for 2 because by that time the game's almost over. I think it's a low B. I'm really sad to say this, and I might be completely wrong. Screen grab this and shove it in my face later by all means, because I want to be wrong about this, but I think it's a low B. And if you were shocked by that, you're going to be even more shocked by my rating for Bruni. Because when I first saw this card, I'm like, this is a draft bomb! This is a bomb! It is Archimedes, but for one more, I'm going to get to draw a card when, if they can get rid of it, if they somehow can deal with this, I'm going to get a card out of it. There are better, and I think almost much better 4-drops that I want to be playing in this set. It's still a B, don't get me wrong. It's still great. I'm still happy to have this in my deck. But again, I think it's a low B, and I almost think it's actually lower than Archimedes. Because Archimedes at least isn't conflicting with those 4 and 5 drops that I want to hit. But if you go into turn 3 Archimedes into turn 4 Bruni, there's a good chance that you might actually get blown out. As crazy as that sounds. I'm questing for 4 every turn and there's not much you can do about it. I think it's a low B. And I think it's lower than Archimedes, and it should be higher. I don't know, guys. Those are the two that are tripping me up in terms of the rating the most. They should both be A's. In any other set that I've drafted, those would be A's. I don't know. I like Mini from Floodborn more than Archimedes. I like the 3 willpower, but I don't know. Okay. Earth Giant. Don't play this card. Yeah, this is a low D for me. It's already not much above the average stat line. The vanilla stat line is 3/4 lore for 4. So you're getting 1 more strength and willpower, but at the cost of giving your opponent a card. No! Oh my gosh, it is not nearly significant enough a body to warrant giving my opponent a card. Like, I would want this to be a 3-cost 4/5/2 lore to be giving my opponent a card. Think about, in the last set, think about Meg. She was unankable, okay, so that is a small detraction. But she was the equivalent of giving your opponent a card. So I'm talking about the 3-cost 3/6/2 lore, you have to discard a card. So I have to discard a card. So again, I'm at a card disadvantage. Am I giving my opponent a card or am I discarding a card? For the sake of argument, if I had these two side by side in terms of that part alone, giving your opponent a card is slightly better than you having to discard a card, because there could be situations where you physically can't discard a card, whereas you can always give your opponent a card. So it's slightly better to give your opponent a card than to discard a card. But also, I can choose what card I get to discard, and I can discard a garbage card, whereas I might be drawing them into an amazing card, right? So keep that in mind. So I've just maybe countered my own argument. Sometimes I play devil's advocate with myself. By the way, I need someone to discuss these on. Patrick has retired from getting on these with me. So if anybody wants to come on board and talk about stuff with me so I can have another devil's advocate other than myself and my own brain fighting with itself, then great. So discard a card, your opponent draws a card. debatable which is better. But I'm paying 1 less. I'm getting an extra willpower on my 2 lore character, which matters a lot. Yeah, this is much worse than that Meg. That Meg arguably was like a high B for me. But yeah, I said don't play it. Okay, it's a D. You can play it, but please try not to. If you're giving your opponent a card, make it the last turn. Like, okay, I'm going to draw you a card, but you got 1 turn to answer me before I win. Ugh, no thank you. Gale! Yet another 2 lore card that when I saw it, I'm like, this is amazing. This is an amazing draft card. Is it? So this whole, when this character is banished in a challenge, return this card to your hand, could sometimes be hugely powerful. Specifically in Ursula's Return. I can't remember which of Ursula's minions it was, which of the eels it was. But what was it, 4-3? 4-2. The 4-2 uninkable 3 cost that had that ability. That's a lot more relevant because you can use it basically as 4 damage for 3 costs, just again and again and again, just decimating their board every turn. This, you're not running it into anything. It's a 1-2. So the reason you want this ability on this character is that I can keep questing, and no matter how many times you challenge it, I can play it again. The problem with that is I'm paying 3 ink every time. So I'm effectively paying 3 ink turn after turn for 2 lore and 1 damage to a character of my opponent's choosing. Nah. And considering that that steel card I was talking about that deals 2 damage can get rid of this and it won't come back to my hand? No. It's still a 2 lore character that's really hard to remove permanently. So it's nothing to scoff at. It's something that you will play. But this is a C for me. And maybe not even a high C. Already I want to play Archimedes over this. But again, it's not controlling the board. My 4s and 5s are what I'm winning the game with in this set. This is a distraction. This is a trap. It's a C. Play it, but don't draft it highly and don't draft a ton of them. White Rabbit. So this is a vanilla stat line that's been around since set 1 as well. The 3-drop 3-4-1. And back then, shout out to Lorcana's Wardrobe. The Wardrobe was a decent card to draft. And all the more so, I mentioned how vital it is to control the board in turns 1 through 3 so that your 4 and 5 drops and maybe your 6s can take over the game. This helps a lot with that. Is it better than some of the other 3-drops? Not necessarily. But it can survive a lot. It can trade with a lot. It can take out a lot and not trade, right? It's a very solid body. It's still a C. It's still not something I'm drafting high. But it's a pretty high C. I really like this stat line in the early game. And it's not irrelevant in the late game either. All right, Madam Mim. 4-cost, inkable, 3/7/1 lore. With the Mim ability, you got to bounce something, which sometimes can be an asset. In draft is probably more of a hindrance than an asset. But can definitely be an asset. It can protect a low-cost character that produces a lot of lore that you can easily drop down again. If you've got some comes into play abilities or on play abilities that you can reuse, great, right? So it can absolutely be an asset. But it's less of an asset in draft where your deck isn't as curated as constructed. And at the start of your turn, you may move up to 2 damage counters from this character to choose an opposing character, which I mentioned in the Nokk can be a really powerful effect. That's healing and removal, all in one package. There is one problem. The Nokk is on play. This is at the start of your turn. And so Madam Mim still needs to be around at the start of your turn for this to happen. Now with 7 willpower on a 4-drop, she's probably going to stick around. But she's not necessarily going to stick around all the time. So there's times where you're not getting this ability. It's still probably pretty good. Like, without that ability, I'd probably still play a 4-drop 3/7 that has the bounce ability that I can usually make into an asset. At the very least, it could get me a 1-drop inkable back that I can use as ink on the following turn or on this turn. If it's turn 5, right? So I'm still playing it regardless, but just don't see that ability as like busted, because there's going to be plenty of times where it's not relevant, and it's got to be from her. Let me just be clear, because the Nokk moves it from anything. This has to be moved from Madam Mim, the damage, right? So, what does that mean? It is it's a B. It's a card that I'm very happy to have in my deck. Definitely not wanting to pick this first. If you open it, you probably have to pick it first, right? It's not wheeling, but you're hoping someone passes this to you around like picks 2 to 4. All right. Luisa. Oh my gosh. Shout out to Nive. This came out as I'm recording this in one of your posts on Twitter earlier today about whether you should take this. Yeah, you should take this. This is so far above the vanilla stat line, especially if you're drafting as I've been guiding you, which is turns 1 to 3 draft cards that will control the board. So I've already kind of cleared the way a bit. And my 4 to 5s are probably shutting things down a bit, depending on the cards that you're drafting. Certainly the cards that I'm drafting are really locking the game at that point. So Luisa's fairly unimpeded by the time I've got her out. And just 8 willpower, 3 lore is just huge. 6-drop uninkable is nothing to scoff at. But you can, as we've established, you can get to 6 ink. On the play, playing 1 card per turn, you can get to 6 ink. So even if you got her in your opening hand, as long as you're smart with your plays, you can get to 6 ink and you can play her. So she's not out of the realm of question in terms of ink. It's just a matter of... it's always a risk to have an uninkable in your deck, but this one's so worth it. This is an A for me. Probably a low A. It's not like a supreme bomb or anything, but it's so well statted. So, yeah, I will happily take Luisa anytime. Anna. Oh, this is a tough one. You're not shifting her. Let's be very clear. If you're drafting the Annas, you're drafting wrong. You shouldn't be shifting this. So are you paying 7 uninkable for 4/5/2 lore with this ability to exert all opposing characters? Exerting all opposing characters can be powerful, but there's a good chance that the bulk of your opponent's characters are already exerted by the time she's coming out, and maybe there's 1 or 2 characters that aren't, that they want to protect, that you can then get rid of favorably. Great! 7 uninkable for that? I still think you play her. You gotta be careful playing her. Think about how you're mulliganing, think about how you're inking, know that this card could be coming, right? And how you draft, right? If I've got a character like this, I want to draft more controlling. Because if I play this and I've got a lot of Archimedes 2/2 evasives and Gale's 1/2s, her ability is irrelevant, right? I need a lot of white rabbits. I need a lot of the 5-cost 5/6 whales that are coming up. I need controlling cards to make her worthwhile. So I'll play her, but I'm not drafting her nearly as highly as the rest of you are, so I'm probably never going to draft her because I'm not willing to pick her up as highly as probably some other people are. So I would have her as a C, but it's an ability. Again, you're gonna confuse the best case scenario with the average game state. Best case scenario, she could be amazing, but there's plenty of times where she's going to be just a 7-cost 4/5/2 lore. All right. Other Archimedes. Electrified Owl. Love that. So, Other Archimedes is a 5-cost 1/4/2 lore, evasive, challenger +3. So, whereas the other Archimedes can't do any challenging, part of why I love evasives in draft isn't just because my opponent can't deal with them very easily. It's because I can take out some of my opponent's weaker characters than my evasive and survive to go back and quest later. So it could be a board control element and a good quester, right? If it's just a good quester like the mini Archimedes, that is not as potent. The problem with this Archimedes is that it's competing in a 5-drop slot that is stacked in this set. I still feel like this lands in the top 3 or 4 5-drops in this set, at least in terms of commons and uncommons, but it's probably at the lower end of that spectrum, so it's definitely a B, but it's probably a lower B. I still love it. Happy to have it in my deck. Real happy. I'm not shifting it, unless I'm desperate, right? I should hope I'm not in a situation where I have to shift this, right? So, but a 5-drop, evasive, that can challenge as a 4/4 with 2 lore. Happy to have that, but it definitely pales in comparison to some others, right? So, mid B? Definitely B. We'll see where it lands. Speaking of 5-drops, Elsa, the spirit of the 5th spirit. I was about to say the spirit of winter. Nope, 5th spirit, this one. 2/5 evasive, 1 lore. When you play this character, exert chosen opposing character, and it's got rush. Lots of things going on with this card, right? Usually, the more that a card does, usually the better it is, right? It's either more flexible or more kind of toolboxy where it can fit the situation. It's that 2 strength that's killing me. 2 strength on a 5-cost rush. By the time it's turn 5, 2 strength ain't doing a heck of a lot. Why, guys? You couldn't have given it... Even 3, I would have been thrilled. But 2? 2 is dealing with 1 and 2 drops. Like, other than our small Archimedes. My opponent just played the 3-cost 2/2 Archimedes. Evasive 2 lore on the other end. This is just harps from the heavens singing, right? But again, that's an ideal situation. And the amount of times that comes up is probably going to be pretty slim. Chances are the rush is almost meaningless on this. Chances are the character that you're exerting, it's somebody else that's challenging it for that ability to be impactful. It's not Elsa exerting the thing that she is then going to then rush into. She's going to exert something that a beefier body is going to rush into or challenge into, and then she's going to rush into one of their little 1 or 2 drops. That's still pretty good because she's evasive and will then survive to start questing for 1, but she also just quests for 1. This is probably still a B. Like, I don't want to dismiss this card, but I'd actually probably prefer Archimedes over Elsa, the 5-drop. Probably. Right? It challenges... Yes, it's got one less willpower, but it challenges for 2 more. It quests for 1 more. It doesn't have the exert ability, it doesn't have rush, but if I've got this and the other Archimedes in the pack, there's a very distinct possibility I'm taking Archimedes. So that qualifies as a mid to low B. Whew! Man. I am... This is hard for me, folks, okay? I'm having to talk down on cards and characters that I really love. Speaking of which, Genie might be my favorite character in all of Disney. And I'm really struggling with giving this one a good rating. Again, 7 uninkable. Whew! 7 uninkable. 5/5/2 lore, not a terrible body, right? But not great. 1 more strength than the Anna, right? So a slightly better body than Anna. When this character is exerted, opposing characters can't ready at the start of their next turn. Huge ability, especially in draft, when we're usually just going all in every turn, like exerting all of our characters. So it's going to shut off any character that wasn't played the turn before. And if you've got any way to exert that character, then obviously this paired with Anna is amazing, right? But problem is, Anna at least has the effect immediately. You play her, the opponent doesn't have time to work around it. The player doesn't have time to account for it. It just happens. They can't respond to it. This they're ready for. They know this is going to happen. Unless you have a way to both play him and exert him in the same turn, they know this is coming. So they're going to play around it. Do they have the time to play around a 5/5/2 lore? Maybe, maybe not. But all they need to do is hold back one of their characters that can go in and challenge this the following turn. And you've locked them down 1 turn. Maybe that's enough to win the game, right? This could absolutely win the game. But this feels like a win more card. If you're in a strong position, this is going to work really well for you. If you're behind, this is not going to work well for you. They can hold back what they need to hold back to deal with this. They can quest and challenge with what's expendable and can stay locked down for a turn. I don't think it's unplayable. I think that you're going to want... This is going to be stuck in your hand a lot. And when you finally play it and finally exert it, it's going to be too late. Does that make it a D? I want this to be at least a C. I want it to be at least a C. It feels like it should be a bomb, right? If this was inkable, 100%. It might even be an A or a B. It's probably a D. Why? Ooh. Ooh. What would I pay for this for it to be amazing? It's a 9-drop, 6/6, 3 lore. Uninkable. But what would this need to cost for me to consider this amazing? 6 for sure. 7 I can get away with. If this costs 5, if you could get this out on turn 5, imagine the opponent plays characters in such a way, and maybe you play a bodyguard so they don't want to challenge your characters, and you're each just kind of questing out. And turn 5, they've got 4 characters exerted. I just told you all many times, don't think about best case scenario. You're not going to get this out on turn 5, maybe like 5% of the time. But it's possible. And even on turn 6, if you get this out on turn 6, if they can't remove it, and there's no hard removal other than Glimmer versus Glimmer, which is awful, so don't play that. This will probably win you the game if it's played on turn 6. Assuming you didn't fall so far behind in the early turns, play those board control cards 1 through 3. Yeah. And if I have to play this on 7, great. And the fact of the matter is, if I can't play this on 7, it means my opponent doesn't have enough characters in play to have even 2 exerted, which means I'm probably winning. So if this is stuck in my hand because I'm winning so much that they just have no exerted characters, okay. But this will come down a lot earlier than your opponent's ready to deal with. This is an A for me. There's almost certainly cards that I'm taking above this, but this will be a bomb. People will be terrified of this. And heaven help you if your opponent drops this on 5 or 6. Whoo! That one's intense. All right, Maleficent. Speaking of bad Maleficents that we started this with, 3-drop 0/4 lore. I don't care what else is written. You tell me 3-drop 0/4? At least it's got 2 lore, right? But when it quests, you can bounce a character of your opponent's, but one, it's a little one. Character or location or item, I know, but let's be honest, most of the time it's going to be character. You can bounce one of their little ones, but you have to discard a card in the process? And then you're going to lose this to their 4/4? Or even their 1 and 2 drop? No. This is a D. Ugh. Ugh. No, thank you. Alright. Monstro, really straightforward. 5-drop, 5/6/1 lore. This is a common vanilla stat line. And it's a beater. So if you want a more controlling deck, value this a little bit higher. If you're trying to go a little bit more aggro, value this a little bit lower. Again, 5-drop, there's a lot of competition. So I'm not taking this very high. I'm taking it fairly low. So it's a low C for me in this set. Normally this would probably be a high C for me. But this is a lower C for me in this set just because of the sheer volume of amazing 5-drops in this set. But if I'm at a good draft table and they're drafting the 5-drops really aggressively because they're so amazing, then I'm probably taking this a little bit higher. So adjust based on your table, but somewhere in the C range. You'll be satisfied with it. It's not questing. It should be the one that's controlling the board. If you're questing with this, it should be because you're way ahead. Magica Dispel is a constructed card. You should not be playing this in draft. This is a horrible body. This is a D. Still a decent body just in general, but you're paying way too much for it. So you can play it, but you shouldn't. And it should be ink most of the time. We've already established with Coda what the 2-cost 2/2 lore is worth, which is probably a C, but a really low C, especially in this set. There's a card in Ruby. It's coming up, Arthur, that rocks this. So it's even less valuable in this set than it normally would be. Yeah, it's pretty low. You shouldn't draft this, but I mean, if you got a lot of bodyguards, if you got especially a lot of the 3-drop Fix-It Felix, I mentioned this. Yeah, okay, I'll probably play 1 or 2 of these and maybe see if I can make that work. But yeah, it's most of the time I'm actually usually happier dropping this later and just hoping that it's kind of questing for my last lore, or I've controlled the board enough that it's less a threat. I'm dropping this at 2. I'm assuming it's going to die really easily. Rafiki. So Rafiki, 4-cost 1/4 2 lore rush. When you play him, he gains Challenger +4. So for 1 turn, he gains Challenger +4. Now I trashed Zeus in the first chapter, especially in draft, in terms of being a 4-cost uninkable 4/4 rusher that then dies on the backswing. So does this, but at least it's dealing that 1 extra damage, and it's challenging for 1 more than Zeus was. But the good thing about Zeus is he continued to have that challenger on subsequent turns. So if somehow, some way he survives to another turn, you can swing in to a bigger character that you can't with this one. And I'll be honest, there's been quite a few times where in test drafting where I've wanted to play this character before he has someone to really challenge, because I don't have another good play on 4 or on the turn that I'm able to play him. I don't have something else to play. And so it's like, well, I can't play nothing. And he's going to be questing for 2, so I kind of want to get him on the board. But then he doesn't have Challenger anymore. And the rush is irrelevant. So then he's just a 1/4 2 lore. He's hard to time well in a way that I really like. So he looks a lot better for me than he plays out to be. So he's a C for me. And probably a high C still, because the ceiling is high. I say don't think about best case scenario. Don't ignore best case scenario. Like, what's my ceiling? What's the best that I can accomplish with this? And it's pretty high, but not high enough for the amount of times where it's just awkward. So it's a C for me. All right, what else we got here? I mentioned don't draft the Anna that you can shift onto. This is her. So she's 3-cost uninkable for a 1/3/1 lore that your opponent gets to choose and exerts one of their ready characters. The good thing is it's on play. I mentioned this with the other Anna with Genie, when they can't plan for it, when it's a surprise and it just happens. So on play ability is really powerful because they can't play around it. They can't respond to it. But they get to choose which one's exerted. And you're still paying 3 for a 1/3/1 lore body. Oh, no thank you. This is a D and probably should be an F. Yeah, actually, you know what? This is an F. I mentioned some of the high quality 4-drops, and I alluded to this character earlier. King of Hearts. I love the King of Hearts. Oh my gosh. I'm probably going to overrate him because I love this so much. This is, I think, the first repeatable lockdown card. This is the first prison card where you can just shut someone out completely if you can play around it. So 4-cost inkable, 1/4 2 lore. So not a smoking body, but it's 2 lore character with 4 willpower, so it's not nothing. And you can exert it to lock down an opposing exerted character for 1 turn. So if they have a bunch of piddly dudes and 1 beast, not necessarily the beast, but a big character or an impactful character, you lock it down and they'd have to run 3 characters in this to matter. So that's a great situation. If you got bodyguard, especially there's a 5-drop bodyguard we're going to talk about in Steel that is fantastic, this becomes amazing. Even the 3-drop Fix-It Felix might not be able to protect this for very long, but can still be great. There's times where you're going to want to hold this back, wait for them to use the character you really want to lock down, and then lock it down if you don't have a bodyguard. But the amount of times where you can lock down their best characters and just control the board and or quest with abandon with your best characters is really great. It's slow, so this is one of the main reasons that I'm going to argue you need to control the early game to free yourself up to have this dominating card be able to just lock them out. So their board isn't wide anymore. It's tall. It's 1 or 2 big characters that you can then lock out with 1 or more of these. Especially when we get into top deck mode, where you've locked out their best characters and they're just top decking and maybe they get something that can deal with this eventually, or maybe they only get small drops that can't deal with this. It's going to be a thing of beauty. So this is... I'm going to try and be unbiased and say this is a high B, but I'm probably going to take this at low A. I really love this effect. And when you don't have something that you care to keep locked, you're questing for 2. Great. Great. I love this. This is probably my favorite 4-drop. It's amazing. The fact that it's inkable on top of that is just fantastic. Love it. King of Hearts, you got my heart. All right. Let's keep moving. Camilo is garbage. 6 cost 3/7. So the same stat line as Mim. But you gotta wait to quest to get the bounce advantage, if it even is an advantage. And the amount of times you're gonna have a character that you want to bounce that has more than 1 lore is pretty low. So the ceiling is low on this. The cost is high. Yes, you're gonna come up with the best case scenario where you play Luisa into this and you quest for 3 a couple times, and the turn that she's finally threatened, you quest with this and gain her lore and return her to protect her and drop her back down. You'll be like, this is amazing! Hallelujah! Yeah, it's not going to happen often enough for this to be worthwhile. It's still playable. Like, I would still probably play this in my deck, see if I can make it work, but it's probably a low C, high D. It's a build-around. Let's put it that way. I don't often refer to build-around cards, but this is a card you got to build around, and if you are building around it, you're probably not building your deck well. Hypnotic Strength, I'm not going to zoom in on. Draw a card, give a character challenger +2. For 2 cost, this is better than that heal in Amber that says draw a card. You know, one of your early plays can take out something bigger. I'm happy enough to have this in my deck, but like on the fringe. So what does that mean? Low C? Yeah, don't just discount it, but just don't be drafting it high just because it says draw a card on it. Finders Keepers is another card. Amethyst, I feel like, is just all cards that I feel like I should love. It's my favorite color, so I should be biased towards it. But for some reason, I'm poo-pooing all of these cards. Finders Keepers is not good in draft. It's way too slow. Way too slow. Yes, if you get in top deck mode, it's amazing. But you should probably be... If you're getting into top deck mode, something's gone wrong. Most drafts end up being in top deck mode, but when I mean top deck mode, what I mean is the boards... so this has to be like pure top deck mode. In other words, the boards are clear. We're down to like 1 character or no characters each. And we're just living off the top of our decks. Then it becomes great. But if you're in top deck mode, as in my hand's empty, but we got a big board in front of us, I'm paying 5 to not affect the board. Great. My opponent could draw a 3-drop, 3/3/2 lore, and I think they're doing better, right? Even though I've got more cards in hand now, but they've affected the board. It's too slow. I might have one in my deck, you know, high D, but yeah, it's almost always going to be ink. Know the Way should just read 3 cost, draw a card. Song. 3 cost song, draw a card is what we know the way reads. And that's not good enough. That's a D. Gather Knowledge. Again, you're going to tell me, oh, but we can't gain lore right off the play on anything pretty much. Isn't this amazing? What happens if you're at 18 lore? Sure. What happens if you draw this early and you play it any time before turn like 8? And you've gained 2 lore, but they play anything that gains lore repeatedly, and you have nothing on the board to deal with it because you just played an action card that does nothing. No, this is an F. This is an F. Please don't play this card. You will win with it very occasionally, and you're going to feel justified in playing it. But if you do a large number of drafts over time, you will find that you lose the game again and again because of this card. Magical Aid. So this is a worse card than Hypnotic Strength. It draws you a card in that you get the character back, but it's got to be a really specific type of character for you to want it back in your hand rather than just drawing any other card, because then you got to play it again. It costs 1 more. Yeah, it gets you Challenger 1 more, but no. I'm playing Hypnotic Strength over this every single time. And it's got to be a specific situation where I'm going to trade anyway to even get it back. But if it just stays on the board and it's a 5/6 with 5 damage on it, so I didn't get it back, it's not refreshed, it's just Challenger +3 or something. Ugh. No, thank you. Retrosphere is one that should be ink most of the time, but every once in a while will not be bad in terms of tempo, right? You can effectively pay 3. You bank 1 early in the game, and eventually you pay 2. To return a character or occasionally a location costs 3 or less. Especially if it's like those last turns where it's like they just need 1 more character to quest for 1 or 2 more to win the game, and you just need 1 extra turn, and you can bounce their character to buy you that time. It can be helpful. And or you're just going really aggressive and just want that tempo. There will be times where you will play this card, but most of the time, 90% of the time, it should be ink. Which means it's a D, but it's a D that, is probably one of the more likely Ds to get played. And someone's going to, have me captured saying D a lot. Playing with Ds. You shouldn't play with Ds, okay? Ds should just be for ink. Maxwell Crown is a hard F. I'm not even going to go into it. If you're paying 8 to draw a card, I thank you for the win. Amethyst Chromicon, 2-cost inkable. Each player draws a card. If you're giving your opponent cards, and chances are they get to, take advantage of that first, unless you're, again, at top deck mode. No. Again, it's a D. It's a D that I may occasionally play with the D. But you probably shouldn't. But maybe, it's a card that I could see surprising me. But I doubt it. Elsa's Ice Palace is god-awful. My apologies. Is awful. 3-cost uninkable. First of all, awful. It gains a lore. If it survives. It's got 4 willpower! On a location! What? What? No. Its ability is okay, but not even that impactful because it's only for 1 character. It's not like once that character's gone, you can like choose another exerted character. It's not like every turn you choose one to lock down like King of Hearts. It's not repeatable. And it's got 4 willpower. Next! So if you thought that was the 3-cost Amethyst location I was talking about that was good, no. The library. Oh. I've never been this excited about a location in draft before. I think this might be the real deal. I think that, Queen's Castle in draft I think was solid. But this costs 1 less. It produces 1 less lore. Fair. Absolutely fair. But it's got 1 more willpower, which could be the difference. And you can be drawing a bunch of cards off this, right? Queen's Castle, and again, I'm not arguing that Queen's Castle is bad, and not even bad in draft. I think it was pretty solid in that set. But the problem with Queen's Castle is you were kind of at the mercy of what your opponent did on their turn. Which is to say, you needed to hope that your character was still alive by the time that it got back to your turn to draw that card. This, you are in control, right? Yes, it can still be affected on their turn, which is great. But you can, if you know you're going to go in and trade something, you can drop this, move that character into it, go trade, and draw your card right away. Here's the thing. Anytime someone plays down a location with lore, your opponent's going to zero in on it and charge in. 1, that can be an advantage to kind of stall them. Hey, you got to work to deal with this location before it gets out of hand. And at 8 willpower, they're going to have to send a lot into it. But sometimes you can lose it for free or relatively cheap in terms of assets on their side. So I would hesitate to play this on 3. But what I would play is play it on 4 if I've got a character that I know I want to trade that turn. So play it on 4, move the character that I'm planning on trading into it, trade immediately. I've already recouped my card. If nothing else happens, I've recouped the card that I've invested into playing the library, and they got to throw a lot at it to get rid of it. So already I'm pretty satisfied. But then the following turn, I can move 1 or 2 characters. And again, I've got these early characters that are controlling the board. So they're likely to want to be trading with things anyway. And then I'm getting card advantage on top of that. Ooh! Be careful about investing too much. Sometimes we can get too greedy, right? And I'm a greedy boy. I'm a greedy, greedy boy. So sometimes we can get too greedy and just want to move everything into this all the time to get so much card advantage. But we can lose the game on 8 cards in hand. So keep that in mind. Don't be too greedy with this. But if I'm getting 3-4 cards off of this, amazing. Sticking my bodyguards on this, yes, they can, obviously bodyguard, they can challenge the location instead of the bodyguard. But if I've got a character they really want to deal with and they got to get through the bodyguard, and I've put the bodyguard on this, oh, I'm getting all kinds of value off that. So this is probably a high B for me. I don't know. I'm drafting this over Archimedes. Over the 2/2/2 lore evasive. Yeah. Yeah, it's just real good, guys. It's real good. I've been doing some test drafting, and it's amazing. All right, that's it. That's Amethyst. It's better than Amber, but I wanted to love it more than I do, but there's still some really good cards in this color. Some really good cards in this color. So, as usual, Amethyst is amazing in draft, and I'm very happy with that. And we'll see you all next time. Thank you all. Thank you so, so much. I think I'm going to be saying this a lot lately. If anybody's watching this, especially to this point, I love you. I love you so much. Thank you. Let me know in the comments why you're here. Because I just really appreciate it. Thank you all. See you next time.